we're moving to the next item. We want to invite Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones up. Thank you for coming up. The first item here on our monthly budget report is, well, Scott.
Yes, sir.
And you got Deborah. So is Deborah going to do some talking today?
No, well, maybe. She sometimes has to bail me out.
Okay, this is information. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Scott Jones. Just while Deborah's pulling that up, I need to apologize to Brian. When I saw the television camera, I thought they were here for this agenda item, so I hugged him and stuff, said, so Brian, I got excited. So, because, and I say this, I know, with a little bit of a humor to it, but this is a really just pivotal and important agenda item, because I sit in front of you and I attest to you and say to you publicly that the Utah State Board of Education is fiscally sound, that we can meet all of our obligations and commitments known to us at this time, that we do have funding systems and internal controls in place to ensure that funding goes to the end of the row, so to speak, down to the LEAs. Subject to review of this is important, though, I'm subject to review by you of this report and any questions or concerns you may have about the status of our funding. It's that important, and why it's a perpetual agenda item to you. So we are very appreciative of the opportunity to sit in front of you and provide you with this in-depth analysis. It's big. I mean, we all know how big the public education budget is. So I do appreciate the time and attention that you do give to this matter. So, Chair, subject to any questions or concerns related to the monthly budget report, that would conclude this portion of it, and we can move to the discretionary funds at your direction.
Questions from board members regarding the report? I'm seeing none. Please continue to the discretionary funds report, which is also information.
Right. Yes, sir. Thank you. So I'm going to pause here for a minute and let you and orient you again to this. Well, I'll pause after I orient you to it. The upper right-hand corner are the fund sources that make up your discretionary funds account. And in the main body of this report to you is what's currently funded from your discretionary account, project-wise or program-wise. This in itself, and this is where I need to pause, this in itself is the product of the vetting of the Finance Committee in the October meeting, and then your approval of the discretionary funds, you as the board, your approval of the Finance Committee recommendations, or the motion the Finance Committee made. So this is where we stand with your discretionary funds report after those great actions that correspond to the Budgetary Procedures Act and the Money Management Act. Chair, I'll go back to you if there's any questions or concerns with this. But I'm sorry, sir, before I do encourage board members to take a look at that upper right-hand corner and see that there is funding available for additional projects at your direction. There's a process that we would follow. If you have an idea on that, we take it up through the Finance Committee and then ultimately to here, depending on the actions of the Finance Committee. So thank you, Chair. Subject to any questions or concerns on the discretionary funds report, this will conclude the monthly budget report, and we'll send it over to Director Young.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments regarding our discretional funds report? And also, thank you for that invitation. Member Cannon, you have a question or comment?
Would you just give us a little more information on phase 3 of the school report cards that's listed on discretionary funds?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Right. So as you know, each year we're required to release the school report card, And what this funding supports is different phases of the development of the school report card, posting, or that report, that overall posting to it, to ensure that we meet all of the requirements that have been identified as being an integral part of the school report card. So the project itself was broken up in phases, to my understanding. Dr. Norman or I don't think Assistant Superintendent Nielsen is here today, but it's a co-joined process with both us and Superintendent Norman's staff. And that's to fund phase 3 of the school report card, to ensure compliance with the reporting or the.
Okay, and is this what shows up on Data Gateway?
Yes, I believe it is posted on Data Gateway, and we just recently released it, so. Okay, come here, Jared.
It's a separate site. It's separate from the.
Yeah, well,
Go ahead.
yeah, so,
Introduce yourself.
Jared Felt, USB IT Director. It's a separate site. I think it's schoolreportcard.schools.utah.gov.
Okay, so not on the Data Gateway, sorry.
Thank you.
My correction. I was gonna hug him.
do you have a follow-up, Member Cannon? No?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other, but again, that invitation, it's there, and there are some funds. There's been times there wasn't any funds there, which, good to have these opportunities. So if you have any questions, or if you have an idea, feel free to present it, and we'll get it in finance. So thank you. Next, we have, did we hear anything from Deborah at all?
No, but if you want to, I can make her say something, so.
Okay, no.
Okay,
She-
all right, sir.
We're good. Good to see you. Next, we'll invite, this is informational item. Sarah Young, I've got to get used to saying this, Sarah Young, Chief of Staff, and then the other Sarah, their care specialist. Are you having both Sarahs or just one? Okay. This is on the the federal COVID-19 Relief Fund update, again, informational.
All right, just one moment while I'm getting my slides on the screen. I may need a little technical support. My apologies. All right, thank you for your patience. We like to build the drama here. So Sarah Young, currently Director of Strategic Initiatives, but soon to be your Chief of Staff next week. So thank you for the opportunity to present here today. Our intentions are to provide you with an overview of the current state of the COVID-19 relief funding in K-12 education before advancing into a conversation and hopefully action related to the remaining available state reserve that's available to the board for direction from the overall ESSER, Elementary Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Fund that we have here at this office. So as a friendly reminder, when we talk about COVID-19 relief funding here in Utah, we have actually received multiple awards from both the federal as well as the state legislature in terms of relief funds that have been then made available to our K-12 local education agencies through this office's administration to be able to address the needs and response due to COVID-19. When we present these to you each month here at the board meeting, we address them in terms of our oldest award all the way going through our most recent award so that you have a sense of where we are as an agency and as a state in terms of reimbursing these funds to our LEAs to be able to support them in their projects and needs. This chart, which we share each month, is really demonstrating the comprehensive nature of each of these awards and specifically purposes and guidelines that have been presented around each award and how that has been funded out to the field. I call to your attention the two numbers at the very bottom of that screen, the $914 million. It's important to note that over 90% of the COVID-19 relief funds have been made available to local education agencies. So later today, when we are talking about the state reserve, I would note that's less than 10% of the total award that is being made available related to these state projects. It's been something that clearly we support here at USBE and is very much in alignment with federal guidance that the needs of COVID-19 were occurring at the local level and our local leaders needed the resources to be able to stand and address that. We currently are managing over 1,100 grants through the Utah Grants Management System specific to these awards. And as a component of that, would just remind the board that these are reimbursement grants. So LEAs will put together a plan. They submit those plans to the agency for review and alignment with federal requirements. Once they're approved, the LEAs do submit documentation to this office for review before the funds are released related to specific expenditures. As far as an update on our oldest award, this was the CARES Award that was received in May of 2020. This is where we have both our ESSER 1 and GEAR funds that need to be spent by our LEAs by September 30th, 2022. You will note in terms of the update that we're providing from November 17, 2021, when these slides were prepared, that we are doing really well as a state in terms of reimbursement and utilization of the full federal funds that were made available to us in CARES. We have reimbursed over $58.7 million in ESSER 1 to our LEAs, as well as over $700,000 in terms of the base that you establish specific to the LEAs that would not have received a distribution through the directed federal award in alignment with Title I, Part A. Additionally, GEAR is actually up to 67.7%. I'll speak about some of the efforts that the agency has engaged in to help increase reimbursement in those areas at the conclusion of this presentation. In terms of our second round of awards, this was received in the Coronavirus Relief Supplemental Act in late December of 2020. This is where our ESSER 2 and GEAR 2 awards are located. And again, our LEAs need to spend these awards and request reimbursement by the September 30th, 2023 timeline. Noting ESSER 2, which is going to be one of the state reserves that you will be reviewing today related to state project and board proposal requests. We'd like to call out that 90% of those awards, again, are distributed directly to the LEAs. And we saw the majority of those LEAs choose to spend their funds on the three categories you see before you: addressing accelerated learning for students, purchasing educational technology, and then specifically implementing summer learning and supplemental after-school activities. We would note that LEAs are not able to access those ESSER 2 award funds until they've completely expended ESSER 1 in regards to making sure that we are not returning funds unnecessarily to the federal government that could be used to support our community response to COVID. Noting that requirement to spend ESSER 1 first, we do see slightly lower reimbursement values here in ESSER 2. We are a little over 23% in terms of reimbursements. Again, noting that these awards did not go live to the field until April and May of this year, it is to be expected that these again are lower, noting they have until September 30th, 2023 to expend the funds. In terms of the additional awards, we would note that Gear 2 was due to this agency October 29th. We received some outreach from a couple of our LEAs that weren't quite ready to submit yet, and we did extend the deadline to December 3rd. So they actually have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. Just so you know, we do regularly make those accommodations for LEAs in terms of making sure that if for some reason they had a challenge with submission or getting board approval at the local level, that we as staff really work to accommodate those needs. In addition to that, the award for over $968,000 to the University of Utah Reading Clinic, as directed by the governor's office, has also been made, and they're in the process of being able to seek reimbursement against those funds. Finally, we have our EANS, or Emergency Assistance for Non-Public Schools. This is again where the Utah State Board of Education assumed responsibility for equitable services as opposed to that going through the LEAs as it had traditionally been done for previous federal awards. And we're currently working with those non-public schools to be able to support them in their reimbursement request, as well as the state does provide them professional services related to professional learning for their teachers, related to online and distance learning, as well as opportunities related to tutoring services as allowable by this program. Round 3 is the American Rescue Plan Act, and again, this is where we find our ARP ESSER, which we will again be acting on today in terms of the state reserve, as well as our EANS 2 or ARP EANS, which is the second round of that program, and those funds need to be spent by September 30th, 2024. In terms of the American Rescue Plan, again, just as a general overview, the state received over $615 million, 90% of which was awarded directly to our LEAs. For the state reserve, we do have specific guidance from the federal government in terms of how that reserve may be spent. We as an agency are required to spend 5% of the total award, not just 5% of the reserve, for addressing accelerated learning. And that's the 30.7 plus million that we will be discussing later today in terms of action for the board in consideration of how those funds should be utilized to meet this federal requirement. Second, you'll see the 2 additional requirements in terms of 1% required for evidence-based summer enrichment programs and 1% for evidence-based comprehensive after-school programs. This was again awarded through a competitive grant to the greater community, and the board approved those initial awards in alignment with what funding was available at the time in the October board meeting. As far as a plan update goes, we like to keep you updated on where we are as your staff in terms of approving local plans. Of the 170 LEA ARP ESSER plans, noting we do have some LEAs that have 2 plans, they're the exact same. They just come from 2 different sources, one being their federal allocation of the 90%, one being from the base. We have approved, as of the date of this slide deck preparation, 151 with 19 LEA plans in revision. As of yesterday, we had that down to 14 LEA plans that are still in revision. And we would note those revisions generally are technical in nature. We're missing a signature, or we need a link to where the plan will be posted as is required by the federal guidance. In terms of the plans as well, we presented this to you last time, but we included this for an update. This is just an analysis of where the LEAs are choosing to spend their money in terms of the number of LEAs that are expending towards each available use case. If you look at the chart, you'll think to yourself, that's more LEAs than we have in Utah, and that is correct, because we do have LEAs that are choosing to spend their funds in more than one category. And I would say that is the trend we see comprehensively in terms terms of reviewing the LEA plans, that their needs are diverse and they're using these funds in different areas to really target and address those needs specifically. As far as the general highlight goes, I'd call to your attention the first line because this is an update from our last presentation. We're happy to report that our Utah LEAs, although being required to spend at least 20% of their local award to address accelerated learning needs due to COVID-19 potential disruptions, we in Utah have seen our Utah LEAs use more than that required amount to be able to address local community needs they've identified. The current average is 36% of the total local awards are going towards that effort. And we think it speaks to one of the needs that we've seen at the local level and where our leaders have decided to put those resources to address meeting the needs of their students, teachers, and families. As far as the majority of LEA plans, again, we see them spending the majority of their funds above and beyond the 20% to address accelerated learning for students and a variety of evidence-based strategies, purchasing educational technology for students, capital improvements that do include HVAC in terms of improving air quality and circulation and filtering, as well as student and community mental health services as the top 4 use cases in the LEA plans. As far as additional USBE action goes, your personnel are continuing to review these plans, supporting with revision, and we are actually over $538 million in terms of the awards that have gone of the $615 million to the LEAs have been approved. We've worked with the Utah Department of Health on the K-12 school-based COVID-19 response grant program. Your staff, both your COVID staff as well as your expertise in school nursing, worked to review grants from the community and supported 16 LEA awards for new school nurse FTEs that happened this past month. I would note there were 16 applicants and 16 awards. So our partners at the Utah Department of Health have reopened that grant opportunity for additional LEA applications, which we would expect to see over the next month. We've also provided technical support for our LEA business administrators in 2 separate meetings in the month of November. The goal of us as COVID staff is to make sure they have the same information that we're providing here to you, as well as encouraging them to seek reimbursement related to that Gear 1 award where we had seen lower levels of reimbursement, just reminding them that it was something on their radar so that they don't feel shocked when we reach September 30th. We will continue to provide them reminders related to the due dates associated with these funds so that we have full communication and support for those expenditures. Last but not least, USBE has started work engaging with other states through a recovery network to share lessons learned and develop communications regarding the state outcomes. We're aware that legislative session is coming up and that there are a lot of questions about how our K-12 system has utilized these relief funds to respond to needs in the greater K-12 education and school-based communities. And so by partnering with other states, learning from their efforts, sharing in resources, we expect to be able to develop these communications in a more timely fashion and be more thoughtful about the use of taxpayer resources to do such. As far as the state transparency dashboard goes, just a friendly reminder to our board as well as the general public that we do have this dashboard available on our website. This is where we post all of the LEA awards. So if there's any questions about my district or my charter school, you can see the amount of funding that they've received as well as the status of reimbursement of those funds to get a sense of how much has been claimed in terms of those local resources. Finally, last but not least, this is our final slide concluding the information section, but sets us up for the next items, which is the timeline related to the state set aside that we are bringing to you right after this information item. And so in terms of where we are, as a friendly reminder, we really took a thoughtful approach to the use of these funds, giving our LEAs time to submit their plans so that we could present that data to you as part of your consideration related to where the state was going to choose to support projects with the state available reserve. In September, October, more November, we were able to present data related to the student performance component, so you could be aware as a board about academic needs our schools may be experiencing due to COVID and how these funds could support them. And so we are bringing to you as the next item after this information section, opportunities to be able to respond to board-driven proposals related to how these additional reserve funds could move forward. We are required to be able to have those funds obligated for ESSER 2 no later than January 6th. So we do not have another board meeting between now and that due date to be able to obligate. In addition to that, we are asking for your direction related to the ARP ESSER funds, noting that those for the evidence-based efforts and strategies will need to be submitted as a supplement to our state application that was approved per us submitting those additional components for approval before we're able to take action on those individual proposals. That is what makes this a time-sensitive discussion that we started with you at the November study session and are here today to be able to continue. So Chair, with that, that brings to the end the information portion of this presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions as board members may have them.
Okay. Questions from board members? Vice Chair Davis, so you have a question or you?
I just have a motion.
Okay, so I think that's into the next step. So before we get, I'm not, Member Lear, you have a question?
Right, just a checking my own understanding question, if that's okay. I think I saw in just the last slide that the amount, excuse me, the amount of administrative set aside that we have is $30 million. Is that right?
No, so
Okay.
not for administrative, my apologies.
Well,
So
maybe me. Go ahead.
this is the amount that's available for accelerated learning. So that's how we chose to frame the needs instead of around the federal term learning loss. And so that's what generally describes what we have available related to supporting evidence-based projects in that space.
So just to clarify, Chair.
Follow up.
So the state reserve of 61 million, where's the rest of that?
Great question. So leading into the next item, hold on, I'm going to scroll real quick. Here we go. So you'll note that we do have that 30.7 million that's required for accelerated learning, but we also have additional money in the ARP state reserve that we would call flexible state reserve. So that is also available. We also funded the 2 additional required competitive grants for after school as well as summer learning. We also funded the state base out of that component. And then we do have money set aside related to the administration, which we generally use to support the 2 staff members on the CARES team. That's Sarah Harward, as well as Jessica Kerr, who support the reimbursement process for LEAs. And then the needs around the communication tools, the dashboards, the update to the grants management system to capture some of this data. But this shows you what's up on the screen of what's still available in each of these different pots of money, as well as what requirements exist around those pots.
And sorry to be, if I'm being dense, but one more clarification. So the 7.5 million, 8.2, after we've paid the specialists, after you've, everything else you've said, that money is still available. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
I think we've got a few board members. I'm not sure if they're getting in the queue. Vice Chair Davis, you're in the queue. You're in the queue for motions. Member Moss, you're in the, you have a question or you're in the queue for your motion? Before we get to the motion, the action part of this, let me just ask a couple questions to manage expectations here. Is someone from Scott or you, somehow we got to keep a little bit of a tracker here of what funds are available as we make these motions to move forward. Is somebody maintaining that as we're moving forward to say, this is what's left, this is,
Yes, so that would be me. So we have what I've created here is a projection sheet. So you'll see that we have the table that we shared with board members in preparation for this item. And then as I click over, you see we have the scenario planning. And so what the intent is that as the board members start to make decisions about where the money is going, we will place it here in this table, and you'll note that each individual category is highlighted with a different color, and then we have remaining amounts available here at the bottom. I can make this larger on the screen, but this will give you a sense of what is still available based on decisions as the board makes them.
and that's good to keep jumping back into that, so kind of help guide us. We are a little bit behind schedule, but this is really important as it's time sensitive. So I think we're ready to go to, I'm not seeing any, Jenny, Earl, you have questions, or I think everyone's in the queue to start taking action, so we might as well start that. So we're going to move to 5.3.1, which is action on our ESSER 2 state reserve fund. So we'll start with Vice Chair Davis.
I move that the board shifts the previously approved K-3 professional learning for literacy project and the early learning coaches for rural Utah from ESSER 2 flexible state reserve to ARP ESSER evidence-based strategy for accelerated learning state reserve for funding, and I'd like to speak to the motion.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, do you want to speak to the motion?
Yeah, these two things have really strong components. They meet all the federal requirements for this particular pot and the evidence-based learning. And so some people here have made recommendations that fit better in the flexible pot. And so by shifting this that we've already approved in previous meetings over into the more kind of restricted category, it frees up the flexible funds for more of what we want to do here.
Okay, discussion to the motion. I know we have people in the queue and their lights are on, so can you just raise your hand if you have a question regarding this? A lot of this, of course, was discussed a month ago and done very well. I really appreciate that study session. I'm not seeing any discussion. Laura's on the line and I'm not seeing her hand raised. So with that, the motion before the board is that the board shifts the previous approved K-3 professional learning for literacy project and the early learning coaches for rural Utah from ESSER 2 flexible state reserve to ARP ESSER, I should say, evidence-based strategy for accelerated learning state reserve for funding. That was the motion, if I remember right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Laura, are you wanting to be on record? It's unanimous so far.
Yep, I'm always saying aye with everyone.
Yeah, we've got a yes. We're cranking up some volume here.
Thank you.
Hope you're feeling better.
Coming.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, next, Member Norton.
Yes. I make a motion that the board fund the USIMS proposal with $17.2 million with ARP ESSER flexible state reserve and ESSER 2 state reserve funding.
We have a second.
Second.
You want to speak to the motion?
Yes. This is a legacy project for USBE, and using these ESSER funds to support this proposal would clearly define remaining available funds. It is one that touches every student, every teacher, every administrator, and the USBE. And more importantly, no, not more importantly, but as important is that our rural districts need this project finished now.
Okay. Any other discussion to the motion? Will you raise your hand? Because I've got a lot of people in the queue. Member Cannon? And then Earl, I saw your hand up. Okay.
So,
Will you hit your mic again?
flashing green.
It's still not on. There we go.
There we go, okay. So in our, somewhere in here, we were given a chart, and the chart had red dots, green dots, and yellow dots about the possibility. The red dots said they may not align. And so, like I say, I think USIMS is great. I'd love to see the rurals get it. I'm just asking someone to speak to this chart. Because I believe USIMS was on there.
Okay, please do.
Of course. So happy to address that question. So to clarify, Board Member Cannon, are you referring to these two red dots right here next to you, Sims?
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of that, you'll note that in preparation for the November study session, we were trying to kind of lay out what potential options or approaches could be and provide exemplars for you to consider. In the case of USIMS, what we did was then kind of do an alignment related to requirements that may exist for one or more of the funding streams. In the two cases of the red dots for USIMS, you will note that these are both specific to the use of the 30.7 million for accelerated learning. So in the case that because of the way the current motion is structured to not use those accelerated learning funds, but instead use the flexible state reserve, this would not be a barrier to the current motion as it stands.
Thank you.
Okay, Member Earl?
Yes, just a second. I have to rethink what my question was. I should have wrote it down.
Oh, you're good.
Oh, my question is this. As we go through and make motions, can we go back and revise if we choose to? In other words, if we get to the point where we want to incorporate something in, can we remove, not necessarily remove, I shouldn't say that, but even adjust amounts? I just want to be clear on that, so.
Okay.
We
In
may have
Robert's
something,
rules,
yeah.
when motions are made, whoever was on the prevailing side of the motion can attempt, it's not guaranteed, but attempt to bring it back. And it could be for whatever purpose, bring the motion back. It could be amended. It can be, certain things can happen, but you have to be on the prevailing side. And we've had examples of that in the past where somebody wanted to rethink or restructure a motion. So that's how that would work.
Okay, okay, thank you, that's my.
Okay, any other discussion to the motion? Member Hanson?
So this, as was noted, this is a legacy project. It's been going on for some time. The legislature has been providing funding incrementally. So I'm just asking the question, is this just to accelerate things? We don't think the legislature will provide the needed funding to get this done in time? Or
Let's
is
invite
this-
Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones to respond to the question from Board Member Hanson.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair, or I think it's afternoon. On this project, so just to clarify, we received 17.2 million of one-time non-lapsing money for the USIMS project, state unrestricted money for it, right? So we're not incrementally being funded. We have that 17.2 million in there. What this does is, to the answer to the Board Member Hanson's question is yes. I mean, it would accelerate this because it would provide not only the 17.2 million of state money, but now 17.2 million of ESSER funds. However, acceleration is dependent on the market, and a lot of the reason why we haven't really gone into the 17.2 million of state funds is the difficulty hiring and retaining programmers. That's where, so there's not a budget issue, there's a delay issue related to, having the staff to do that. So if we could hire more staff at higher rates, and compete in the market, then conceivably or conceptually, we'd be able to accelerate, right? Because we'd have more staff to do this. What I want to be clear on, though, is by, if the board chooses to fund the 17.2 million out of this source, you're essentially freeing up 17.2 million of state money. You know, so you're like almost doubling Billy. Now, if we, you know, I did talk to the LFAs initially, we can't, none of us staff can speak for the board or for the legislature, but essentially we'd be able to keep that, the board would be able to keep that 17.2 million. And if you wanted to move it out of the USIM spectrum, that state money, and put it someplace else, we could get it reallocated. But, the budget right now as it stands, Chair Huntsman, to Board Member Hansen's question, is 17.2 million, right? So, we're within budget. It's just been delayed because of other factors with that. So, Chair Huntsman, did I answer Board Member Hansen's question?
I think it did, but I'll let him, but to just sum it up, it creates options and opportunities as we move forward in the USIMS space for all of our stakeholders. So
maybe
it doesn't
I can-
guarantee anything, it just,
No.
it has the potential to accelerate, yes.
Okay, maybe I can
Do you have a
just
follow-up?
follow up. So we're not doubling the USIMS budget by doing this. And that money that has already been allocated, you're saying it wouldn't be pulled back by the state. It would still be available for us to reallocate within USB.
That is my understanding,
Yeah.
yes,
So-
Chair Huntsman.
What's the confidence
even-
level
yeah.
on that understanding?
Correct.
So based on my experience, by now, board members know that, I follow the policies and I follow the law to the T, right? Yes, I mean, we would be subject to reallocation, but we're subject to that with any other fund source. In talking with the LFAs, who again, I know cannot speak for their bosses on that too, there's a lot of trust here with the board and with the staff here that run your budget, right? So I really feel strongly that the legislature would, in fact, I think they would see the opportunity here along the same line. You have this funding, there's no supplanting issue. There's, it's a allowable cost, and now you're freeing up 17.2 million for potential use still in USIMS for doubling that budget at your direction if we need it. I can't say for sure right now though that we'd need anything beyond 17.2 million, right? But market factors could play into it. So if we didn't need that for the 17.2 million for that, I really feel strongly that we have the support of our legislature because they are very public education focused. They're very supportive of you and your direction. So that, if you needed or wanted to reallocate the 17.2 million, you could. There are no guarantees, though. Anyone that sits in front of you and says 1 + 1 is whatever you want it to be is wrong. Okay, 1 + 1 is 2, and I can't make that guarantee. So,
Okay. Yeah, so you have a question?
Yeah.
Oh,
Because
please.
are all these others motions?
Well, I'm trying to do it by hands because they're in the queue to make motions. So we have a motion, we're speaking to the motion, so so I've got Hanson taken care of. Do you have a question? Anyone else have a question on this motion, raise your hand. Oh, Earl? Okay,
So this may also be for Deputy Superintendent Jones, but so theoretically, I'm just thinking ahead with the 17 million, we may need more than the legislated 17 million because of market factors, and we're seeing that difficulty. But also, when we get to that point where we're ready to start implementing, will we need additional dollars or need to go to the legislature to ask for LEA licenses? I know we were looking at potentially a 4 million ongoing, but we only had a 4 million one time, if I understand. So we may need a lot more money to get the LEA component to work with USIMS. Is that correct?
true, yeah, Chair Huntsman,
please
if I may.
speak to it.
So I appreciate the question because it allows me to clarify that. When we proposed the USIMS project to the legislature, and the legislature funded the 17.2 million, in addition to some other money that was given to us for the overall project, the key is that we testified that once we build the system, because I just want to be clear, we're building USIMS, we're not buying it, it's not provided to us by a vendor. Once we build it, then the IT budget where it's at right now, or where we could do it, we would fall back into that. So the maintenance of it, or the sustainment, which I think is where Vice Chair Davis is going partially with her question, is covered by, because we build it and we own it, we can maintain it, right, with the existing level of staff we do. So I don't see any long-term maintenance costs outside of the ability or the capability of what the IT budget is now. Yes, we need 17.2 million to build it, but once it's built, we can sustain it, okay? Now, to the other part of your question about the interoperability in the financial systems there, that's where it becomes, we just don't know enough right now, because we are trying to ensure, and by the way, the focus working group started yesterday on this component of USIMS, the financial component. Until we get all that input in the building there, until we, as everyone knows, we did receive 4 million of one-time money to help with those systems. But long-term licensing costs aren't clear yet until we actually get further along in the USIMS process, which is why we're also asking for a year extension to the USIMS project through you to the legislature to ensure that I would be able to come back and advise you on what sustainment costs would be or what impacts would be on the LEAs. Because the thought is, or the direction we're taking is to be as least impactful on their budgets as possible, right? To get them to correspond with that. But the estimate of the licensing fees right now is still subject to being further along in the financial component of USIMS. Chair, that concludes my long answer to her question.
And I might add to it, if I could, the part that, I'm going to circle back to it, because of how these funds were allocated, it can accelerate USIMS in the process and a few things, but as a mothership, we refer to it at, but the legislature is built, this little bit of extra money can help with better accommodations for LEAs, and then if there's money left over, then that's the what if, and it moves to that space of, okay, let's get everyone docking to the mothership. So
Right.
it sets us up for acceleration, and then also future opportunities as we spend this money first and state money last. It puts us in a good position to better support LEAs through this whole USIMS experience as this debate. Did I misrepresent anything?
No, sir,
I think
that's
all the
correct.
questions
But
were answered.
may I follow up on that? I think
Yes.
you've hit an important point. So recall that I did testify to you how grateful and appreciative I am of the legislature for funding the $4 million of one time. However, again, I know you just heard me say we need more time to know how much this. I can pretty much estimate that $4 million is not going to go very far, okay? It's not that I'm ungrateful for that or thing, but right now, market pressures, cost, I'm sure many of you are familiar with software costs and things like that happen, right? And I know there's some people that argue we could do it for less for you, et cetera, et cetera. But to my earlier point on the 1 + 1 = 2 motive, the thing of it is, or straightforward speaking, is the thing of it is by funding the 17.2 million out of this and then again freeing up that 17.2 million, that down the road, that 17.2 million may benefit the LEAs at your direction and through the legislature, of course, because we might need to get it reallocated. That might be the solution to them for, I believe what Vice Chair Davis is asking is, licensing costs to get better systems to interoperate and to his point, dock to the mothership. So Chair Huntsman, did I answer that question, or hopefully I'm not confusing it?
I think it's been answered, but we've got other questions
Okay.
over here, so we might as well stay.
Okay.
Member Earl, you had a question on the motion?
I do have a
Or
little bit of a
discussion?
question. It's apparent to me that we have the funding available already. I had wondered the appropriateness of either amending this to the balance of our, I guess I'm speaking out loud, but I could make a motion, but the balance of our the funds that are remaining pay for the balance of this. In other words, if there were 12 million funds available, it would be used there because we have the 17 million already, and this would be usage for whatever we need. Whereas we have a number of projects already suggested, recommended, people put effort in, that if there aren't enough funds, that those would be eliminated. But this one, we have adequate funding for.
So you're welcome to amend
I know
the-
I'm speaking out loud because I'm trying to think what would be the best direction, whether it's to delay this vote till the end, to amend the funding, or to maybe amend it completely.
Well, we have we have a motion on the table. You
Yep.
can either amend it or try to postpone. I'm just trying to help you.
I know. I've been pondering that for
So
a
let's see if
minute
there's
here.
other questions.
So, okay.
Anyone else have questions regarding the motion on the table, if you just raise your hand? Member Straight? Try it again. Try jumping to that other mic, if you would. We can get IT to come in and get,
I'll just,
I think there's too many.
I guess the key thing is my question is, in regards to, this is, what will be the process for what was left over?
oh, you're working
It just
now.
worked, yeah.
There you go.
So what would happen to the remainder of the balance in the future if there was a remainder of balance? Because it seems like we're a little nebulous on the exact numbers anyway.
Yeah, so if I may, Chair.
Yes.
And I did consult with Chief of Staff Young. I think what we need to be, to pause right here and be very clear on is the ESSER money, this funding you're looking at is time limited, right? So if you were to approve, the 17.2 million to cover USIMS, that would have to be expended within, and Chief of Staff Young can correct me if I'm wrong, but we really only have one shot at this, right? I mean, we really have to report to the federal government and do this on the timeline and the commitment, if you will, or obligation of this money towards something. And then we have to meet the timeline of, when it has to be expended. So if I may, Chair, can I ask Chief of Staff Young to either attest that or tell me not to speak anymore?
Okay.
So.
Chief of Staff, Young.
Thank you. So that is correct. So in terms of our steps towards obligation, that is, we do have a clear due date for ESSER 2 of January 6th of 2022. And then as far as ARP ESSER, it's March 24th of 2022. Once that kind of those decisions and those obligations are made, we communicate those to the Department of Education. And so I, in support of Deputy Jones's statement, we wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity a year from now to be able to say, actually, we'd like to award additional money into that USIMS space based on the existing obligations that'll be decided in this board meeting.
Chair,
And
if
that
I may.
speaks to the time-sensitive piece of obligated
Right.
funding.
So
correct?
Chair, if I may follow up on that
Yes.
as well. So earlier I attested or stated that, we're also parallel to this seeking an extension to the timeline for USIMS from July 1st of 2023 to July 1st of 2024. So if you were to approve this, right, the timeline is synchronized, right? We would utilize those federal funds. And in that sense too, that's an acceleration, right? Because we know we're under a strict timeline to execute those funds. We wouldn't waste them, but we would utilize those first, so we would meet the timelines. And then too, you're freeing up 17.2 million of state money that you could utilize, subject to reallocation or that decision point. So thank you, Chair.
May I
So,
ask a follow-up
so
question?
that wasn't your question yet, but that was a response to
Okay.
Straight,
Yeah.
right? So, Member Straight, you have a follow-up?
I appreciate the clarification. I think we need to
So
move
it's-
forward with this one. So can we call the question, or we have to come back? Or?
Well, I'm leaving it up. Okay, we have Member Earl.
So let me understand, we're not, this is going to come out wrong, and I apologize, so
okay.
forgive me.
Oh, it's all right.
We're not hurrying to spend the $17 million, but if we get the $17 million, then we would be hurrying to spend this new 17, sorry, I'm just
you're
asking
fair.
for
No,
clarification, because
fair-
it
very
seemed
fair
to,
question.
okay.
What it basically, this action will do,
Well-
to keep it really simple, tell me if I'm wrong, approving this motion, we will commit ESSER 2 funds to USIMS. The other funding that's there, it allows us to, it will be in somewhat pause and flux, that this board can spend later if, as a USIMS is developed to be used in USIMS and other items, depending on the availability of those funds. It pretty much allows us to bank a little bit of reserve in the future.
Yes, sir.
Is that,
Yes, and.
and we spend this first and not our
Well,
state money.
Yes, and Chair, if I may, I
Yes.
really think I understand her question, right? So what I want to respond to Board Member Earl with, and all of the board, is we've budgeted for $17.2 million. We know what we need to get already. So it's not a matter of, well, we'll just find things to spend it on, right? We already know, we've already budgeted for $17.2 million. We know we need to hire more labor. The concern, though, is the labor market. There's pressures out there. I do think it'll get better, and we'll be able to spend the $17.2 million in the allowable fashion that we've already identified with how we would spend the $17.2 million state money. So I feel strongly that, I think that's what she's asking, are we just gonna accelerate this and just waste it? No, we already know what the $17.2 million is for, right, and specifically. But I do have to make sure I put the caveat in. I mean, you all see it in the economy, right? Construction costs, labor costs, all these types of things are factors in this. So, Chair Huntsman, did I answer Board Member
And
Randall's question?
yes, thank you. I do appreciate that. My thought is, we could put 12 million and it would accelerate. It would do the very thing you're saying. We could put 10 million, it would do the same thing you're saying. It isn't the 17 million, that replaces the funding, so to speak, that's currently there, and it opens up the other for something else. My point is we have numerous things that people are interested in. Sure. This would consume a mass amount of that funding. And that the balance, the balance of that is what would still do the very thing you're saying. If there were 10 million, it would do the very thing you're saying.
Chair, if I may.
Because we have the 17 million set aside, right, that we're using, so.
Right.
Okay.
Well, yes, to Chair Huntsman's point, if I may, to Board
Yeah,
Member
please.
Earl's statement, I think we're understanding each other, I really do. I'll just say, that if you use $17.2 million towards USIMS, you're freeing up $17.2 million of state money. So yes, to your point, if the board were to say 10 million, yeah, right.
That has less restrictions on
It has
it.
less restrictions on it, yes.
And if I might also state that it is very difficult, if I could, and correct me if I'm wrong, and comes from the previous, and I didn't weigh in a bunch, I didn't want to interfere with a lot of the discussion in our study session on this, but the challenge with ESSER funds is they got to get spent or they get sent back. And the evidence that's out there already, it's real. You look at LEAs that have been, that's had a lot of, I just call it COVID money come to them. It is very difficult to get it spent for its purpose. And correct me if I'm wrong, in this space. And so between resources and rollout and managing and that, as I look at all of these other cases that sound really good in that, I'm sitting there going, I'm questioning whether or not the water will get to the end of the roll. From the grants management system on and what LEAs are going to embrace more of what we choose to do on our end. So that's one of my biggest concerns about where we're going with the process, and plus the opportunity is there is a consequence if we don't get the work done, and or we have all the stars aligning with staff and process and procedures to get it done. Time's our enemy, the way that I'm viewing this, and so I'm not panicking or anything, but I'm just trying to be a realist in this space. And as I've talked to LEAs about what's on our horizon here, or been on the horizon for us to act today, I don't know if you've talked to them, but there's a tremendous extra present burden already on ESSER, or on, I'll just call it the COVID funding right now, to make sure they're in compliance, make sure it's working. And I also see this as also an opportunity, I'm just speaking in favor of the motion, as an opportunity that we say to our legislative partners also that's in this space, that, hey, we can we're good stewards of money, and we know that certain things that we do in this space, that water is going to get to the end of the row, and this is just one of those projects and a previous project. I'm sure as we move forward, as we deliberate on other projects, one of my biggest concerns is to make sure those assurances are in place that we can have success and just not have a whole bunch of teeny little projects, because those are the most difficult to succeed in this space. I'm just, my observation, and am I speaking wrong or out of context to our opportunity here, Chief of Staff? Your lights. So we do have a motion, but I just want to make sure.
I can concur that we've heard similar statements here as your staff in terms of working with the LEAs. And we also have noted in the conversations that we've had with board members that have requested staff input related to the proposals, we've tried to communicate a lot of those sentiments in terms of making sure that we are pursuing items that are supportive of our LEAs and yet reduce administrative burden that may be, part of this greater landscape of COVID-19 funding as possible.
Member Earl, your light, are you in the queue
No,
for a different motion?
Except
or
for, I turned my thing off and I don't know if I was where Stacy was, or I don't know. And so now I'm out for I don't know where I was at position-wise for making a motion after this one.
Okay, so you're in the queue. Any other discussion to the motion? Not seeing any hands raised, so I'll restate the motion. Will you make sure I state it correctly? And then we'll vote. The motion before the board is the board fund the youth STEMS proposal with the $17.2 million.
Laura's hand was up, sorry.
What's that?
Laura's hand was up.
Oh, I put it down. I'm just voting yes.
Okay.
Oh.
Sorry.
Is she
I
in the
thought I
queue
missed you.
too? Well, just help
I
me.
thought she was in.
Okay. All right, we're going to vote on this. The motion before the board is the board fund the youth STEMS proposal with $17.2 million with ARP, ESSER Flexible State Reserve, and ESSER 2 State Reserve funding. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
One no? Okay, the motion passes. Next in the, who's next in the queue? I'm-
Who did we just have? Who was, I think it's me.
It's you, but then, yeah, I'm seeing, okay, I want to follow this. I'm going to hurry and write this down.
I think Jenny.
Natalie.
Stacy was in there too.
I think these are all for motions, right?
Too, yeah.
Well, James, James was next. I see James. Well, no, James was third after. James is after you.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I do. Jim, you were next. But this, how come it shuffled on me?
That's what I said. I say we clear it, just family feud it.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim, what have you, Member Moss? I know, you were after Member Norton.
Okay, all right. Well,
I know that.
Thank you, Chair. And I have two, but I assume.
We might have to have a
you want
race in the parking lot or something,
Something.
or hula hoop, yeah.
I have two motions, but I assume I need to do one and then get back in line, correct?
That's correct.
Unless somebody wants to waive that, but I don't think anybody will. Here's my motion.
You just
Combine.
Combine your two.
Just make a motion to do this and this.
Okay, I will do that. So I would move that the board approve the pilot program to supplement refugee education as part of the ARP-S or Accelerated Learning batch. This is something I presented on. Stephanie Patton is available if there are any questions about it. It's an innovative way to reach out to students that were left behind during COVID,
Yeah,
particularly.
before we speak to the motion, you've got
I'm sorry.
two parts of your,
I don't-
speak to the
What's the
two
second?
things that you want to do.
Second one is the family engagement program to reach out to the parents of students who have been either disconnected or otherwise.
Okay, and then we'll get a
Disengaged.
second. So there's two things you want to put on the table, correct?
Correct.
And I don't have I didn't write it down, but we'll get it up here. It's, oh, now it's,
The last two.
okay, bam, right there. Thank you. Is there a second before you have us speak to it? Second, Member Booth. Member Moss, you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, thanks briefly. I did speak to the refugee education one. I'll just point out that this serves a particularly vulnerable population, but it will also teach lessons that can be applied to immigrants, English learners generally. And so we hope to implement this and catch some that are truly disengaged during COVID. Can I speak to the second one quickly then on family engagement?
You
So
speak to,
I'm-
it's all
I'm good on
included in
both.
your motion.
All right, thank you. The second is a program I love and first learned about out in LA when I was in my ed studies, and teachers were reaching out to kids who were disengaged, having struggles with parents who had trouble due to either language problems or lack of transportation, multiple jobs. This is a parent outreach and home visit, or now virtual visit program that is already in place. What this does is simply enhance the incentive and payment for teachers to take time to make these home visits. What's beautiful about these, what I loved seeing in Los Angeles, and we did it at Wasatch as well, is that it puts the parent in the driver's seat. It goes out, rather than checking in on the parent or saying, here's what's wrong, it empowers them by having a teacher go on their turf in their home and say, what can we do for you? What are your dreams for your student? What are the challenges or struggles they're facing? Do you know how to use the system? Do you know how to get on Canvas? Do you know how to use the services we have at the school? How can we help you? So that program's already out there. This would enhance the value for educators to do that and reward them for this extra effort to find students that are really being left behind or disengaged. So it would raise it from $30 to $60 in urban areas, $50 to $100 in hard-to-reach remote locations or rural areas. So I think we have Jessica Callan and Christelle Estrada available to answer any questions about the family engagement program. But I will just say I've seen it do great things from, again, kind of inner city Los Angeles to a more rural setting up in Wasatch, and think it goes right in that sweet spot of responding to the needs of COVID, where kids, and especially their parents, might have become a bit disengaged and need that extra hand to empower them.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. The maker of the motion spoke to it. Will you raise your hand if you have? Okay, Member Earl, who else is wanting to speak to the, or have a question? Okay, Member Earl.
Yeah, I just had a question, and I spoke to Jim already about this, but just the concern over the privacy of families. Were you able to find out any information on that?
Do you want staff to answer that, or are you ready to answer that? The maker of the
I'd
motion.
love to hear from staff. I've also discussed it with staff, but staff are the experts, so either way. I
Not seeing any.
think we have Jessica online as well to answer the questions, our parental outreach coordinator.
Okay, Jessica, can you speak to the question?
Yes, and I'd actually like to direct that question to David Soleil, since he is the data privacy expert at USBE.
Wow, we're passing this all over the place. David,
Okay, can I?
full name
David
and
Soleil-
serial number and all that.
Yes, David Soleil, student privacy auditor. Can you remind me of the question, because things bounce around real quickly? So just about the privacy concerns of
The
kids
privacy-
going in homes?
Yes, and maybe the concern of an evaluative process as to whether parents are good parents, bad parents, kind of things like that, where they're invading into the privacy of families. Just making sure we're covered and we're not trying to, we're helping families and not trying to undermine a parent or something like that, so.
Sure. Okay, so some of those things in terms of like what the program actually does, I'm not familiar with it enough to be able to answer. What I know regarding the state's privacy law is that LEAs are required to provide parents with a notice of all the data that they intend to collect on students. And so that could be a mechanism wherein parents are at least notified of, like, if we are going to do something, here is what we collect. And depending on what the information is, we would be able to determine whether parents would have any sort of opt-out rights or if it could only be collected with an opt-in. But that's the basic mechanism we have within the law is parents would be provided with notice within the specific context. And then depending on what we're collecting, we could look further to determine if what kind of choices would be there.
Okay,
Can I add something to the program model? Is that all right?
go ahead, Jessica.
So one of the first core principles of the home visit is that they're voluntary for all. So it would be agreed upon for the parents and for the teachers. They can end it at any time and they go in pairs. So they can recap and debrief afterwards. And these are not targeting specific student groups. So this is voluntary. I just wanted to put that in there.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers the question. I'm not seeing a follow-up. We have a motion, discussion to the motion. You guys raise your hand if you have. Okay, the motion on the table is to add the pilot program to supplement refugee education and the family engagement program, increase educator compensation. Okay, if there's any discussion on this, we're all gonna vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
For the noes? One. Motion passes. Who's next? It was you. Okay, Vice Chair Davis.
This is a really long motion, so who's note-taking? Huh? All right, I shifted it a little bit because I was going to include some of Jim's. So I move that the board approve the special ed teacher shortage, after-school expansion, and DTL from the ARP ESSER Accelerated Learning, scaling the after-school expansion as needed to equal allowable funds or remaining funds. Yep. I move that the board, I'm not done with my whole motion. And the Utah donors choose from the ESSER flexible allocation. So I'll read the whole motion again. I move that the board approve the special ed teacher shortage, after-school expansion, and DTL from the ARP ESSER Accelerated Learning, scaling after-school expansion until funds are expended. And Utah donors choose from the ESSER ARP flexible account. Where the ellipsis is would be the scaling let's say it this way, scaling after-school expansion if needed until funds are expended.
Let's just look over your shoulder really fast before I call for a second. So they second.
You're going to have to provide some clarification, Cindy, on that before I.
Let's just make
I know
sure
you
this
need a
is what
second,
she's
but
wanting to
okay.
say, and then we'll.
Good job. Yeah.
Okay, so,
Do I need to clarify that middle part where the ellipsis
well,
was, Jenny?
well, let's see if we get a
get
second,
a
because then
second.
it doesn't, then you can't speak to anything or get into the discussion. Is there a second? Second, Member Cannon, speak to your motion, and then we'll get to clarifying questions.
Okay, so I think everything's pretty self-explanatory, but you can ask if there's a different one. But so if the funds run out, which they will, then the special ed teacher shortage and DTL would be funded in full, and the after-school expansion would be scaled back to finish out the remaining funds. And then the Utah donors choose, I think, is self-explanatory from the flexible funds.
Okay.
Which would still leave flexible funds left, I believe.
So we have a motion, a second. You spoke to the motion. Questions, comments?
I'd
Member
like to
Earl?
speak to the motion. When
Anyone else have any? I'll get them in the queue on the speaking to the.
do I get to speak to the motion? I just answered her question, but to
Oh,
clarify, but can I speak to the
Oh,
motion?
I figured that was part of your, but yeah, speak to your motion.
No, sorry, I just was clarifying that. So I just like to talk about each of these really quickly. The special ed teacher shortage, if you look at, mitigating learning loss, and you look at our data that we've been presented over the last month or so, we're looking at a special ed population that's been hit particularly hard. And we're looking at reduced graduation rates and lower learning rates. And as far as hitting the special ed teacher shortage, when we get our bodies in the classrooms for our kids, they are already by federal law are required to use evidence-based instruction. So that meets the evidence-based instruction component. What this is it wouldn't require anything new of teachers or administrators, which is something that I feel really strongly about in all of these funds. And it goes through higher ed. So this is something we actually already do with about $700,000 of our federal IDEA money. We give money to all of the higher ed institutions in the state that have special education programs. We, however, are always short for the need. And sometimes becoming a special ed teacher is cost prohibitive. And last year we were short $2.3 million in this area. So with the request. So this would help pump some special education teachers into the system. And as we have recently learned from the federal requirements that you have to have a bachelor's degree. You can't jump into our associate licensure program that we've created for flexibility. Every other category has flexibility now except for special ed. They have to have a degree. So I think this would really help to target some of these special needs learners and get good qualified teachers in the classrooms that are skilled in using evidence-based instruction. The second one is an after-school award expansion. This requires nothing new from the LEAs or the community partners. You'll see a list in backup of all the different LEAs and community partners. I love this program because it's already in play. It requires nothing new of these people. We had the money. We voted on this previously. We approved it. We filled all of the funds for the summer program, but we didn't have enough to meet all the needs for the after-school tutoring. I especially love the after-school tutoring because it requires the community groups or the districts, whoever's running it, to partner with or communicate with the teachers and the LEAs so that they're tutoring on the actual objectives we're trying to make up in learning. The second thing it requires is that they add a high interest element if the students are interested in art or music or sports or things like that. They add an element so these kids don't feel like who lost, a year and a half, who don't feel like they're just sitting now for tutoring for 2 hours after school, sitting there with rote memorization or what have you. They're building a high interest component into this. So I love those pieces of that. The next one is the DTL grant. And let me just say, I believe that this money, if I understand correctly, can be used to hire personnel to help with the DTL grant. Some of our small LEAs never participated in the DTL grant because it's so hard to, and they don't have the staff to do it. And when I hear a woman from Nebo say, I would rather do my doctoral dissertation again than do all the work required for this DTL grant. That tells me something. When I hear someone on our state charter school board who did the DTL grant for her school, and she turned it over to her director and said, I would rather leave education than do this again altogether. That tells me something. So we had schools who participated in DTL who were quick on the draw when the pandemic hit and were able to get that learning going, and it was such a huge help to them, and our state was ahead of most states because of that. I think you noted several times. But we've got to get all of our LEAs to that point, and if they need some extra personnel to help meet all these requirements, then let's get it done so they are ready to use these other tools to help with mitigated learning loss. And then the Utah Donors Choose, I mean, oh gosh, what can I say? I am a huge advocate. When I was on PTA, I used any funds that we could find to give teacher grants. Our teachers know our students the very best. They are on the ground level. They understand the learning loss. They know what tools are needed to mitigate the learning loss. And there will be an understanding that these have to be used for students, obviously, to mitigate learning loss. But I think it's just a perfect use of our flexible allocation dollars, and probably one of my favorite things on this whole list.
Okay, so you spoke to the motion, so now those that want, okay. Question or discussion to the motion, Member Earl.
Yeah, I just had a question. On the special education, I'm just wondering, is there any follow-up built into this? In other words, making sure it actually happens the way we're envisioning it? Because I envision, do you know what I'm saying? People just eagerly, but I'm not sure that happens, right? Just because we've got funding available doesn't mean people race to use that funding, because it will be paying for, right, the education component at the higher ed. So I'm just asking, what mechanisms are built into place for the success of this?
Well, we know they are racing to use it because we were $2.3 million short last year. We had that much interest in people who were wanting to be able to do this. But we have Dr. Voorhees here, and I'm wondering if it would be appropriate, Chair, for her to answer, because it's a great question, what we've seen so far, because this is something that we already do.
And maybe she can answer another question, or you can.
Yeah, we'll invite her up.
I just wondered if, this would apply, and I'm sorry if I didn't do a thorough research on this, it would apply to those that are already in the classroom, that they could finish a degree. Do you know what I mean? Those that aren't completely
You can't
qualified?
already be in the classroom without a
so
degree.
that, you had mentioned that earlier. That's why, or something along that lines led me to believe that.
The only
so.
anomaly in our associate license.
Okay.
By law, they can't.
Okay.
They would start a degree.
Okay.
Director Voorhees.
Thank you, Lee Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support.
Oh,
So, like Vice Chair Davis said, we have for many years provided IDEA funding competitively to IHEs across the state to provide scholarships for students to enroll in special education preparation programs and related services preparation programs. So school psychologists, speech language pathologists generally, to be able to support the special education personnel pipeline. So we have a very long-standing structure in place where we already have an application process that looks at exactly the need in each of the IHEs, how many students apply to the program each year, how many students they request to have funding for, and then because it's a competitive application, we determine based on their application how many students we can fund at each of the IHEs, which is the federal term for University Institute of Higher Education, at each of the universities each year, and we fund them for 2 years. So we fund them for like their junior and senior years when they're taking the educator preparation courses so that they can get their degree and license. And in some cases, they already have a degree, to your question, Board Member Earl, because they have to have a degree to be in the classroom, but they might have a degree in advertising or marketing or in general education and want to get a master's degree in special education that then also will lead them to get a license in special education. And so we also do fund individuals getting master's degrees if it's for initial licensure. Not individuals who already have special ed degrees and special ed licenses who then want a master's degree, but individuals who have other bachelor's degrees who want to get initial licensure, and the right way to do that is to get a master's degree in special education. So, and then the other, like, accountability, it's not really accountability piece, but it's tracking is a better word piece. I interact with the educator preparation program staff. I field, and the licensing and personal prep staff in special education, we probably field a question a week or every other week from IHEs that we have granted these funds to about individual students and their individual situations. They can't go to school this semester because of such and such. They want to defer the funds till next semester. Or so-and-so had to drop out of the program because their spouse got transferred to another state. Can we move the funds to so-and-so who also meets the criteria? Like, we know all of the students that are going through these programs because there aren't that many of them. And we have these relationships, and because Zach and his staff in purchasing are so careful to write our contracts in a way that require that any changes, we have to have these interactions back and forth. And sometimes we actually have to make contract amendments when we want to move the money from one student, or, you know, or extend the money for one semester or that kind of thing. Does that respond to your
That was
question?
perfect. That's what I wanted to make sure we're
Okay.
getting where it needs to go.
Okay, thank you. Raise the hands to the, anything on the motion? I'm not seeing any. Not one there. The motion before the board. Oh, where did? Okay, right there. That the board approved the special education teacher shortage, after-school expansion, and DTL jumpstart from the ARP ESSER Accelerated Learning State Reserve, scaling after-school expansion if needed until funds are expanded and the Utah donors choose from the ESSER 2 flexible allocation. Okay, that's a motion before the board. Yes.
Can we make a motion, can I make a motion to divide?
Yeah, that's possible, but good thing I didn't call it to vote. Okay, do you want to make a motion to divide?
I'll make a motion to divide
Okay.
into those three.
Is there a second? I'm not getting a second. Sorry. Okay, the motion, I'll restate the motion and then we'll vote. The motion before the board is that the board approve the special education teacher shortage, after-school expansion, and DTL jumpstart from the ARP ESSER Accelerated Learning State Reserve, scaling after-school expansion if needed until funds are expanded and the Utah donors choose from the ESSER 2 flexible allocation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
That was an A? Was that an aye? I think I heard. So we had some nay. I thought I had a nay or two. One? Any nays? Oh, okay. The motion passes unanimously. And as I'm seeing this, we don't have any funds left on this. So what do we have left? I just want to, can you recap?
Yes, I'm happy to. So as it stands, the board has fully obligated ARP ESSER Flexible State Reserve in partial to support for the USIMS project. As far as the ARP ESSER Accelerated Learning Fund disruption due to COVID goes, these funds are fully expended and we will need to scale back the after-school award expansion award by $893,000 or $93,002.85. And then up here, in terms of the remaining balance in the ESSER 2 flexible state reserve, based on the commitments to ESSER 2 as well as, USIMS as well as Donors Choose, we have a remaining balance of $785,222.
Okay. I'm sure we'll take care of that today. Who is next in the queue for a motion was Member Earl and then Hart. Well, no, I wrote things shuffled.
No, I'm not gonna.
No, but it-
You're the chair. You call the order you
Okay,
want.
no, you're
I just-
here
mine-
to correct me. I just want to do it right.
Mine list looks different than yours, but mine reloaded, so.
So before, does yours look like mine now?
Are you
Mine
starting there?
changes.
Are you starting there, or
Well,
You
no,
start.
before it changed,
you wrote it down?
I wrote it down.
Okay, then use the written list.
Yeah, so I'm being really careful here. Because when we started this, I put everyone in the sequence, and then people were,
That was smart, because these are mentioned, but somebody turned it on.
yeah,
So
but
because
people
that
turn
last
on and turn it
project
back on, and it
failed,
does a reset.
We'll reduce
So
that last
the only-
project by the balance to take it to
Okay,
zero.
Member Earl, you have a motion?
No, I don't actually. Thank you. We've assumed all the funding with all the other things. That was
Okay,
very
there's a
convenient. So
785.
I'll let Natalie.
Okay, then I had Member Hart. Member Hart, you were you were in the queue in the
Right.
beginning. Do you have a
Right.
motion on this 785 that's left?
I could,
Well,
Scale
I'm going to skip you if you're not. I'm
Oh,
just
no,
saying.
I didn't
In
think
the
I
beginning, I
was-
said, who was in the very beginning, we said,
Yeah.
okay, everyone was loading up in the queue.
That's great. I am making a motion that we approve the case called, the proposal entitled Building Capacity Utah Principal Supervisor Academy for, and it's listed, I need a second to talk about it.
Okay, we're going to find it here. We have a second. Member Hutchings.
Okay, while you're doing that, since there's a second, I'll just.
Okay, do you want to
I'll
speak to your
talk.
motion?
Yeah. Originally, we put this at the figure up there, but since that would put us in the negative, it would be scaled to the remaining funds. The longer we talk about the things facing educators, and we really dive deep, the people on the front lines are really, really having to adjust very quickly to a changing educational landscape, and they need tools to do it effectively. Because when it comes down to it, we're not going to be able to solve the problems here. The problems get solved at the school and local level. I am part of a different initiative which has the same model for principals, and by far, it's called Principal Partnership Network. By far, it is the best professional development and ongoing support that I get as a principal. If we want to support teachers and support parents' voice, then things have to happen at the school level. And this would allow principal supervisors to support principals in what they do so it's a trickle, not a trickle down, but it's a developmental, ongoing, real-time support. So what principal supervisors are the people in local districts who are in charge of supporting the principals. And many of them have been very successful principals 15 years ago, before cell phones, before social media, before the issues that face our students today. If we really want to make a difference, we've got to do it as close to the local level as we can, and this would do that.
Okay, you spoke to the motion. Now we'll have discussion to the motion. And I have two in the queue, Klein and, Member Klein and Member Earl. Member Klein, did you have a question or
I'm just in line.
you're in for something else?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to put that as a hold. Member Earl, you have a question to
I
the?
don't have a comment on this one, thank you.
Okay, you're in the, okay. Any hands raised for anybody that wants to have any question to the, or discussion to the motion? Okay, seeing none, I'll state the motion and then we vote. And the motion is that the board approve the building capacity Utah Principal Supervisor Academy scale to remaining funds in the ESSER 2 Flexible State Reserve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, member, as we do, let's do our quick reset. So, Chief of Staff Young, does that deplete all of our funds?
So it does, based on the motions that have taken place so far. I would note that because two of these projects are specific to scaled amount of remaining funds, they would be feasible to scale further if that is at the interest or direction of the board.
Okay. That's how I understood the motions to do that. Okay. Before we move off on this, we have two hands raised here. Member Klein, Member Earl, Member Klein. And Member Hart, your light's still on.
Oh, my bad.
That was just for my motion.
Okay, Member Earl.
Yes, I'm trying not to be upset and angry here, because this
You're
is
fine.
wrong.
What's that?
This is wrong. We have $17 million of funds already. We assumed all of that funding, and now there were projects that Board Member Klein and I put together that we've assumed all the funding for.
If you're on the prevailing, you can bring it back.
I understand that, and that's why the question was asked. That's why I asked earlier, but it feels very uncomfortable right now. I would like to make a motion that we consider the funding for the USIMS project that's already been voted on, to consider the projects that have already been worked on by Board Member Klein and I, and consider those funding. I don't know, this is messy.
Well, you can bring back, and that's what we said it earlier. There is
scale-
process still here. Do you want to bring the USIMS back? And if you're on the prevailing side, and if I remember right, didn't it pass
I
unanimously?
propose we bring the
So you can.
USIMS
So
back
the question
to
is, do you want to
consider
bring
the
it back?
funding model.
Okay, so you want to bring it back. Is there a second?
So if Jenny voted no, she can't.
Oh, I did, you're right.
But I voted yes, so I'll make the motion.
So did it pass unanimously? Oh, with her with a no. So we got to have somebody. So
So I'll make the motion.
to bring back.
To bring it,
Yeah,
to bring
this
back.
is our
USIM,
process.
yes.
Okay, is there a second from, and I believe that's from the prevailing.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Do you want to speak any more to besides what was already there, been said? Okay, all in favor to bring it back, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Okay, with the ayes, raise your hand to bring it back. You can vote. No, you can vote aye to bring it back. You just can't do the motion. So, with the ayes, raise your hand. Booth, Moss, Klein, Hart, Hymas, Earl, Hanson, Hannon. That's 8. Okay, so the motion's back on the table. Do you have all those? Okay, and I stated so that you can double check on the recording. Okay, the motion is brought back. What comes back is the actual motion. So the motion is right here. I move that the board fund the USIM's proposal with 17.2 million with ARP ESSER Flexible State Reserve and ESSER 2 State Reserve funding.
My motion is that the other, well,
Okay, so you can
or I'm
amend-
sorry,
you
I would
can-
like to amend the motion.
So amending it is you either add or take away. So I think you're wanting to take away something out of the motion. And it might be a dollar amount. I'm just trying to
I
help
don't
you.
have it all added up, so I couldn't.
Or this, whatever.
I would like us to take a vote. And, okay, so let me think how to add. My motion, or my amendment is that we consider, I don't even know how to
Let me
say
help
that.
you with
Okay.
your motion. What are you wanting to do? Are you wanting to fund something or two things or something and reduce
I
this
would like
funding?
at least to consider that funding.
Okay,
those
so we can
fundings.
help you with that and put
Okay.
it on the table. So what is it that you were wanting to put
My
on the approval list?
recommendation, which is the, now I'm so flustered, I don't even know. Yeah, the embossers, thank you, Janet. And Board Member Klein's considerations, her 3 items.
Which
And
equals the
those
sum
would,
of
I don't know what
something.
it equals the sum of.
Okay, we're going to help you with this.
The brain defense.
So,
Hang on one sec.
could I ask a
Okay.
quick clarifying? Because I can help. I think the
Okay, I'm
only,
going to kind of suspend Robert's rules a little
my
bit so we can
apologies. I'm
help with this motion. So feel free to speak.
thank you, sorry, my apologies. My question in terms of providing support to get to a total is just related to Board Member Klein, your self-government works. We have a 1-year, 2-year, and 3-year cost. So if you can give direction about which total you'd like us to account for, then I can add it. The 3-year, okay.
Do you want the total on mine? Or you want to?
So, Member Earl, I don't want to have us a victim of process, so you're right on. You can speak, or somebody else can speak to bring something back. That's all part of the process. So I think the important thing is we're all okay following process. There's people that didn't prevail in all their voting or in some things, but it's process is everything, so that's what we're staying with. So that meets Member Klein's expectation, right? And
9.
so we're doing math.
We're almost there. There you go.
So you're,
Okay, so would the best thing to do,
well, let's just make sure we have this
okay,
clear. Just make sure we get the motion correct. But I'm sure we'll have a second.
Okay, so then.
Well, make sure this motion is correct. To get a second. I think it was, I dare accept a second. I think it was implied what we're doing here. So do we have a second? I'm not going to restate it yet.
A second.
Okay. Do you want to speak to your motion, Member Earl, as this is being summarized?
No, I just feel like we've got the available funds, the 17 million. We have items that people have worked on and worked hard on to try to use these funds for accelerated learning or those various areas, and feel like these are beneficial things and they would be beneficial. So anyways, I'm just speaking in favor of this.
Okay. Discussion, if you guys, well, Member Klein, did you want to discuss? Oh, yeah.
Well,
Did you have anything to add?
no, I just think that these are important and worth our consideration.
Any hands, Member Cannon?
I would like to.
Okay, will you put your,
I'd like to make a motion to divide and vote on each of these individually.
okay, we have amendment to
Second.
divide
Second.
and a second. Okay, we're going to vote on the amendment to divide. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously, so this will be dealt with one by one. Is that how you heard it? So, as this might get a little bit complicated on the spreadsheet. So Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, hopefully you're looking over the shoulders on all of this. So as this is divided, each motion, as we hit each one, reduces the 17.2. You guys understand? And so as we're playing through this, so. I guess the big question is, and we can start voting on this, is the Braille embossers equals X, and then we'll be voting one at a time.
I could even speak to that just a little bit if you want to.
Beg your pardon?
I could speak to that just a little
Yeah.
bit.
Well, we've already spoke to the motion, but before we vote, that will be the motion for the board, is to amend to include the Braille, which, if included, will reduce that 17.2. That's basically what.
Braille embossers are 900.
Braille and what?
900,000.
Okay. Okay, you want to speak to the amendment?
Well,
Or to
yes,
the divide?
to the-
Divided amendment.
Okay.
Okay, you want to speak to it? You can.
I thought there was a question about the cost associated with the embossers, but it sounds like there's not.
I don't think anybody's asked a question on it. Is there any question on the Braille? Yeah, they're all divided.
I have my hand up, Chair.
Yes. Oh, you do. Welcome.
Yes.
Vice Chair
I'm
Belknap.
sorry. I've just been waiting. I also think on the Brailer, I don't know why we can't take that, because it's really not that large of amount. It's our school. I think that we could take that money out of our discretionary funds, or I would turn to Scott Jones and see if we can find $900,000 to support the Brailer. Do we have that, Scott?
Okay, there's a question to staff. Deputy Superintendent Jones, will you respond to the question?
Chair Huntsman, so I have, I don't have we'd have to pull the discretionary funds back up, but I'm sure that we can pay for the embossers. I mean, it would take your action. I can't just singularly or unilaterally say to any board member, I'll go buy these for you, right? It has to be that way. So I'm waiting for Deborah to come back in here with a printed copy of it, because you could conceivably make a motion to satisfy any of this, or, to be fair, if you want to go this way with it, then we can go back and say, well, we'll use this money instead and then free that other money up. I mean, there's ways of doing this, that's for sure, but the simple way, from my perspective, is just to do what you did before, because there's other sources of funding that can pay for these allowably, right? So, but it would take your action. It would take your actions to do that, so.
Deb, Vice Chair Belknap, Deborah's here to respond, but if, in our backups, it also shows what our remaining balance is. Did you have a follow-up, Vice Chair?
Yeah, I just want you to know that I am probably going to vote no on these amendments because I feel so strongly about the USIMs. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Are you bringing up a number of our remaining funds to her question, or she's already said no, that she's going to be voting no?
Yes, sir, I'm trying to find them right, quickly.
So what's in, okay, while you're bringing that up, I don't want to call on, because it was inquired, I need to answer for the body before I vote on this first one. Is that the remaining?
She didn't make a motion.
Well, because we have the first one. Am I seeing 878,000? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we moved to divide.
Divide.
Yeah, it's divided. Okay, there's 878 and 75 cents. 178,000.
It's just under $1 million.
$878,617.75 to be exact. Okay. So the motion, the amendment motion is that the board include the Braille embossers to the amount to be deducted from the 17.2 million. I think that's safe to say, because I think we know what we're talking about here. Any other further discussion to the motion?
Yes.
Member Lair.
I'd like to make an substitute motion.
Okay,
That
let's see.
that the amount for the embossers is taken from a different source, is considered from either our discretionary funds or whatever source that Deputy Jones says is the most
Really
available.
Isn't that more,
source.
that's an amendment to the motion saying that the source comes from somewhere else.
Yes. Is that okay? Can I say it comes from
You can,
somewhere?
you can say
Somewhere
that
else.
if there's a second, but.
Somewhere.
I'll
Who
second that.
seconded it? Okay, so we have an amendment, but we should say you just can't fund it unless you say where the source is. So you have to bring this back to say what funds it's coming from, just not to say it's funded. So I don't think.
Shoot.
I don't think it's going to fly because there's not enough direction in it.
Well, then give me a choice of sources, Deputy Jones.
We are.
It's my own budget, I just get another job, but.
So what you can do is you could make
That's what I did say
a substitute to have Deputy Superintendent come back with the source of funding. I think that might fly before it's approved.
So.
But we're still hanging out there.
Right,
we have to be
I'm just trying to
clean
move
when we're
things
moving
along.
money.
What about if I say, if my motion is a substitute motion to fund the Braille embossers from another fund that Deputy Jones will identify and bring back to us at the end of this
Okay,
discussion?
Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones.
So I have the solution now. We can fund it, well, but it'd be subject to your action.
Well, we're
Right.
doing
We
action
get
right now in
that.
an amendment.
all right,
So
so
what
then-
would it be?
Totally get
What
that.
fund?
Okay, so in
No,
the
pre-reg.
discretionary funds account, it totals 800. Okay, but we have to take out the portion that's called the land exchange money because that wouldn't be allowable to use that for the embossers. However, so we're about $100,000 difference to the $900,000.
Okay.
However, we have $100,000 of unrestricted money available that I could make the difference up to, and we can proceed with buying the embossers. If you commit
But it
this
sweeps
whole.
all of our discretional
It
funds.
does, yes, and that's why I wanted to slow down, smooth is fast. But we want to slow down and say, yeah, if that's an alternative source that's readily available to you right now, the discretionary funds, that would sweep those, or not sweep, it would obligate all of the remaining money in that upper right-hand quadrant. Then we have $100,000 that's flexible to use towards the embossers.
Oh, for the embossers?
But I think the break is going to be needed, though. I think
I think this is really important. But I'm, when will our discretionary funds be replenished? I mean, if it only sweeps it for a month, not till July 1?
No, yeah, we wouldn't Chair, if I may, we wouldn't
unless.
Yeah, it's funded at year-end close.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
replenish
We
until.
wouldn't replenish until year-end close, right?
And, well, if I might take the liberty here in finance, so I would quickly go on agenda in finance, because it's not a healthy place to be, is to have that at zero. What finance would probably be looking at other programs and other funds to have something in place there.
Right.
Because we do have, it is kind of our contingency, and we're sweeping all of it.
Okay.
Yes.
So Chair, no, right, we're not sweeping. So may I pull the
Yeah.
sheet up, please? Because I will show you. It's fine.
It's important that
It'll
they.
work out. Yes, sir.
Everyone makes the best informed decision.
Yeah.
That they can with all the data.
We're gonna get it, done. We're gonna get the embossers, we're gonna take care of everybody. We will. No, I want to, no, not like that.
Scott, go ahead.
Do you have an idea?
The reason that,
Your mic's not on.
I'm sorry. My understanding is the reason the Braille embossers are on the agenda for today is because of the time-critical sensitivity of the ESSER funds. If we don't fund them from the ESSER funds, there's nothing that stops us from bringing that up on another agenda.
You're absolutely correct.
Finding a source from not doing this on the back of a napkin today while we don't have all the information. So all we need to do is vote it down here with the understanding that if that's important to people, it goes back on another agenda. But I don't think there's a time-sensitive nature to the Braille embossers as they sit. It's the ESSER funds that are the time-sensitive thing.
But we have a.
Then let me withdraw my motion and let's have the vote. And then I call a question instead.
Okay.
On
The
the Braille
proposed
embossers.
amendments withdrawn, called to question on.
The Braille embossers.
On the amendment.
Sorry, Jan.
So we're ending debate. All in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
No, it's the motion to end debate on Braille.
End debate.
embossers.
Call to question, end debate.
Braille embossers.
Okay. And those opposed? Okay, we ended debate.
I was a no.
Okay. So the motion that I don't have up here now.
Okay, take it off, yeah, sorry.
Because is to fund the Braille embossers. Did I get that right? Did I say that correctly? And deduct from the USAMs.
Can we speak to this?
What's that?
Can we speak to this now? Or?
No, we vote on that now. It's either this or that. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah. Those opposed?
No.
Okay, but. What's that? Okay, I'll restate the motion. So I need everyone to pay attention because I've only said it like 3 times. The motion is on the very first because it's divided. Okay, is that the board include the item Braille embossers to the amount to be deducted from the 17.2. So it's moving that case forward, deducting the 17.2. as we go through every one of these, because there's a motion to divide, that's the opportunity for the board. Okay? We'll say, all in favor
wait.
of the
You
motion
can't speak anymore because
to
It's
include
divided.
the items Braille embossers to the amount to be deducted from 17.2.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes,
The 17.2 was the amount for USIMS.
that was previously approved in the
Okay.
first motion. We're amending the first motion.
17.2 from USIMS is important
that
substantively. Okay, got it,
That is correct.
got it.
Because we brought that exact motion that was approved back. So you either add or take away, and that's what we're doing. However, I'm just giving you the background on it. There was a motion to divide, so that amendment is divided into, within four areas. So there'll be 4 different votes on this. And the first one is the Braille. I'll read. Well, do you have a question on the motion or the amendment?
I was, go ahead.
Because we have a motion to postpone, and we voted on it, so there isn't any other amendments or anything that can happen. You guys, am I missing it, or am I following it correct? I'm trying to follow it. Okay. I'm going to call to vote. The motion before the board is to include the item, the amended motion for the board is to include the item Braille embossers to the amount to be deducted from the 17.2 million previously approved to fund the USIMS project. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Okay, the noes. Well, the ayes, raise your hand to fund this. So we have Booth, Moss, Klein, Hart, Hymas, Hutchings, Earl, Cannon, and Vice Chair Davis. So the motion passes. Okay. Okay, the next, because this was divided, the next one is that the board include the items self-governing work, the amounts to be deducted from the 17.2 million previously approved to fund the USIMS project. Or did I miss one? Oh, I missed one. My bad. No, the next one is that the board, the amendment before the board is that they include the item brain defense digital safety curriculum to the amount to be deducted from the 17.2 million previously approved to fund the USIMS project. Thank you. So that is the amendment before the board. Member Lear.
I don't support this. It's a vendor bill, and we have 2 or 3 other digital safety protections. We have UETN, individual LEAs have to have their own filters, and to take this away from USIMS, which is going to benefit every single LEA, and is desperately needed, is just not necessary.
Okay, Member Earl, to the amendment motion.
I just really feel like I'm missing something here. We're not really taking away from USIMS unless I'm totally missing something. We have the 17 million there. This doesn't take away from that. So anyways, I'm
It
just not.
technically is because we're
We
talking
wouldn't have
about
the
money.
34 million sitting there. We would just have,
So you-
right?
You previously
Okay.
spent
I just
in your
trying to clarify
motion
that.
that was approved out of a different funding source. So it's reducing that amount from that obligated spending or obligated, it's obligated source of funding. So it's being reduced to a different number. Everyone needs to follow this, correct? Okay. So we have a proposed amendment. Anyone have any questions regarding this proposed amendment? Natalie, your hands.
Oh, I was just going to speak
What's
to
that?
the, I was just going to speak to it if you
You
want
can.
me to, but
That's
if
what-
there's other
no,
questions,
no,
I'm happy to take questions
I see you,
first.
and then Scott, and then Jim. So-
Okay, so the digital, the Brain Defense Digital Safety Program is one of the great things about it is it's a one-time cost, and then and then it gives schools access to it for life. It's not an ongoing cost. It's geared towards 3rd to 6th graders. It's a video, a series of videos and worksheets that can then be taken home and to help facilitate these discussions with parents. There's a parent introductory program to help parents know what this is. It's done in a very sensitive way, a research-based way. If anybody's read the book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, it's the same creator. And right now we've, with COVID, we had a massive move to online curriculum, both at home and at school, and without any training for the kids on how to protect their minds from things that they might be exposed to. And this year it's proven that it has become a big problem just with the database issue, not even being able, UETN not even knowing how to resolve that, even though we had legislation passed, still not knowing how to even begin to tackle that. So while we're trying to figure out ways to protect children, we need to be arming the children themselves to know what to do and how to protect their own minds. And this does it in a very simple, research-based way that's family-friendly. It's completely transparent. Parents, in fact, I hope you had an opportunity to look at the links that I sent you this morning. I didn't realize that the links within the document on the board agenda were not working until late last night. But you can watch the videos, you can see the entire curriculum free for 7 days to know what that is. But, if we're one of the purposes of the COVID or requirements is that that whatever we use it on helps with social emotional learning issues, mental health, creating healthy foundations and protective factors. This does that in a very important way, and also helps kids know how to protect themselves against other issues that we're seeing pop up with, like the library books and the databases, like I mentioned before, and just overall, I think this is something that we can't afford to wait on because it is affecting kids and they need this protection. And it's kind of it's a win-win as far as the cost and everything goes. It's not taking over anything else that's being done. It's just a quick supplementary program that will help get kids in a situation where they can be protected quickly while we figure out more long-term solutions.
Okay. Speaking to the proposed amendment or having questions, discussion to it, Member Hanson, and then Member Moss, you're on that. And then Booth, you're in the queue also.
Thank you. One of the dangers of spending money quickly is that we throw our processes and procedures out the window when we do that. I see some great ideas and there certainly are needs in some of these areas in our schools, but I'm really uncomfortable with picking a single vendor, without doing a needs assessment, without seeing how that vendor's curriculum meshes with what we already have in place, without getting more evidence on that information. I see the advantage to pushing this money to USIMS in that it frees up the same amount of money, the 17 million, to be used at our discretion at a later time when we have time to go through our processes and spend the money properly, and with procedures that have been put in place to safeguard us from coming back a couple years later and saying, boy, we picked that vendor on a whim in a few weeks and now we don't like them. We could have done better. So we can buy the time to address all of these issues by putting the money into USIMS and then pulling that money out later on when we go through our processes.
Member Moss and Member Booth, I see your lights are off. Okay, you're good? Okay. Okay.
I do still have.
Okay,
So-
Member Booth.
So I respond positively to Scott's suggestion and counsel. I mean, those of us who are new kids on the block don't always understand the processes. We're discovering them each month as a new process sticks up its head, and nobody's given us any background, and so we're just trying to figure out what's up and what would the process be when we get the number of emails that we've gotten this week on library issues. I haven't worried about library issues for a long time. I can remember when I was on the NEBO board years ago, and there was a bunch of furor about it, and we put in place processes, but now it's a whole new ball game, it seems. Some of the things that we've seen, and what impressed me with this program, and I was grateful that Board Member Klein provided us the links, because I took the time to go into those links. This was a way of, we can't child-proof all the books in the library or the internet, but we can internet-proof and book-proof our children. And this was a way of helping them learn how to be responsible choosers of what they choose to allow into their minds and where they choose to spend their time if they want to be successful adults. And so I was interested, because we've got to find some solutions to assist librarians and all these administrators that are dealing with everything else that they're dealing with right now. So I think it's not a bad idea to, with those additional funds that would be available, to take the time to go through whatever the process is. But I agree with Board Member Klein that something like this is needed in that educational realm of helping to protect our children, and it's needed fairly quickly. So it would be something that we would want to get on an agenda sooner than later.
I noticed Zach jumped to the table. That means, we've got great staff that they've got some input, but to process to, I always look to legal and like procedurally. Do you have something to add to the conversation for this particular discussion on that?
Yes, sir. Zach Christensen, Director of Purchasing and Contracts. My recommendation and hesitation about identifying any individual vendor in these bills, we are still subject to the procurement code. So we still have to do a competitive process whenever we expend funds over our small purchase thresholds. So unless there is an exception that would qualify for that, we would still have to go out for example, like an RFP. If we identified the need of a digital safety curriculum, we could go out for a competitive process to select the best process at that point, instead of identifying an individual vendor at this stage. Because these are federal funds, we are still subject to all those same requirements that we are obligated to on the state level as well.
Okay, thank you. Member Norton?
Yeah, this is real quick. I just think this is definitely an LEA issue. This is something that, it's a local control issue that these people, in our districts and our charters are making this decision. We have a wonderful program that we're using at this time. I'm very comfortable with it. And I don't know that it needs to come from a state level.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. We're going to vote on this again. Just so everyone knows, this is an amended motion, and the amendment would say that the board include the item brain defense digital safety curriculum to the amount to be deducted from the 17.2 million previously approved to fund the USIMS project. I'm not sure how and also what was deducted by the previous amendment. So that's the amendment before you. Not seeing anybody asking any questions, so let's vote on this. All in favor say aye. Those opposed?
No.
Okay, with the ayes, raise your hand and we'll call them out. Member Moss, Member Klein, Member Earl, Member Cannon. Okay. And Laura was a nay. So the motion failed. The amended motion failed. The next proposed, next amended motion that's going before the board is that the board include the items self-governing works, the amount to be deducted from the 17.2 million previously approved to the funds to fund the US or the USIMS project less what was previously approved. I got to throw that in, make sure you're not so it's clear. I don't know what's left, but oh, thank you. Okay, discussion to the proposed amendment. Seeing none, I'll restate the motion and we'll vote. The proposed amendment before the board is that the board include the item self-governing works to the amount to be deducted from the 17.2 million previously approved to fund the USIMS project in addition to what was previously approved. All in favor say aye. Those opposed? Will the ayes raise their hand? What was heard? No, okay. So, I hard for me to hear. Well, those in support of the motion, please raise your hand. I'll call them out. Okay, Member Moss, Member Klein, Member Earl. Okay, that one failed. Okay, the next opportunity for the board is that the board include the item strengthening civics education to the amount to be deducted from the 17.2 million previously approved to fund the USIMS project in addition to what was previously approved. Discussion to the motion. Member Straight, Klein, then Vice Chair Davis, until this gets mixed up.
Yes,
Member Straight.
Thank you, Chair. I'm currently working with a task force on civics education. I'm not certain this is completely connected. It might be. That's still in the process of being worked on. It's being led by the legislature, by Representative Snow. And so I'm absolutely for strengthening civics education, but I'm not in support of this at this point in time. I'm all for We the People. I think that's an excellent curriculum. It's an excellent program. It has been in Utah for a long time, going back many, many years. So I'm for the concept. I'm for the idea, but I think we're at the wrong point in the process.
Okay, Member Klein.
So just clarification, that was the previous one that we already voted on that you're referring to, I think. This strength, which the self-government works, which both the self-government works and the strengthening civics education are just supplementary. They're not full curriculums. They just are there to strengthen the existing programs or civics. But this one in particular, the strengthening civics education is the Hope of America program. You'll remember I presented last month. It's teaching the principles of the Constitution through music. It's for the younger grades and in the older grades, it's an essay competition, a speech contest, an art contest, a multimedia contest, all based around the First Amendment. So we all voted in support of this last time. It was just asked that we bring it back after we dug into the funding requirements so that we could make sure it was covered adequately. And we did up the amount. I think it was $750,000 before, now it's $2.7 million, to be able to make sure it's accessible to schools throughout the state, even the more rural ones, where they have the opportunity to travel to places like the Marriott Center or the Rice Eccles Stadium. Is that what it is? some key locations throughout the state, stadiums where they can join with others of that age group and sing these songs, and where they have the T-shirt and they learn it in a memorable way that will carry with them throughout their lives, these important principles and concepts from our Constitution.
Okay, Vice Chair Davis?
I'm going to have a question for Zach, Director of Purchasing, but I also want to speak because, it's tricky to look at kind of the evidence of their learning on this, but as far as engagement goes, I do think this is a piece that would fit so nicely into engagement and re-engaging students and that piece that we're also looking at. I personally love Hope of America, but again, my question is going to be, are we in trouble if it's a vendor? And also, I would suggest, and maybe I need to decide if I'm going to amend, but I might amend to the original cost, because I've had kids do it both ways. They've traveled to the Marriott Center, which costs a lot of buses and facility, and my other two kids did it right in their own school, and it was almost better. Like, it's the same program, it's the same music, it's the same everything. So, but even if you amended it to the $750, are we still in this problem space with RFPs and procurement and such?
Zach?
Yes. Zach Christensen, Director of Purchasing. So our small purchase threshold is $10,000. So anything above $10,000 would require some sort of competitive process, unless there was a sole source type process that's been approved. And with that, we would have to look to see if it is truly something that is a sole source, or if it's something that should be a competed process. So that would be the procurement options moving forward. And I can explain more about the sole source if that would help.
Follow up?
Well, so we can't do this anyway, is what you're saying. We have to go through the process.
I'm not telling the board that.
Okay.
I'm saying, like, if we wanted to pursue like this
We could do
concept,
it later through an
do
RFP
that.
process
We
with
could do an
different
RFP
funds.
or.
Yeah.
Okay, Member Earl?
I just think there's so many things we do that are for the mental health, for the emotional stability of children. This is the kind of thing when you put in music, they're learning key principles together. It's just a very beneficial thing. I understand we're going to have to do an RFP for that, and I think it's worth the time instead of always the backdoor type of thing where we're spending more on mental health or social emotional learning or whatever. This is the kind of thing that really kids enjoy this. This is something that is enjoyable, and it's done in such a way that is so rewarding. Part of the reason why this was put in for ESSER funds is because not only does it meet some of the requirements of ESSA, which is one of the components, but it also meets the other key requirements that we have that for ESSER funds, including the social emotional learning, including building resiliency and all those kind of things in kids. So, this is of great value. Anyways, those are my thoughts.
Okay. Member Lear, then we have Hanson and Straight.
I dropped off. I had a question.
You dropped? Okay, thank you. Member Hanson?
And I want to clarify that I'm not speaking against any of these concepts that are up there, but I am speaking in favor of process and in procurement. If Zach won't tell you, I can tell you, we'll be in trouble if we go out and source these people without going through an RFP process. The RFP process is put in place so that we don't have somebody who's, and I'm not saying this is the case, but somebody who's my cousin who I'm trying to direct, money to his business. I mean, it's a place that's very vulnerable to fraud and that kind of thing, and that's why those procedures are in place. So we need to do that. The thing that we can do by using the USIMS pot of money is divert this to USIMS, and we can come back and we have the time. We're too late right now to go through the procurement process to use these funds for these projects. We don't have time to go through that process, I believe, and Zach can confirm that. There are timelines established for getting bids and all of that. So I would urge the board to just vote no on this, and then let's bring these back and do it in a timely fashion and work through our process, and let's do what makes sense for the kids in Utah. But do it according to the procedures we have.
Okay. Member Straight?
Yes, thank you. So apologies to Board Member Klein on getting the two flopped. The principle remains the same, but I would like to point out that I've attended many of these performances, and many schools are still currently doing a program like this. And my kids did it in the 5th grade, and they sang songs about the history of the United States. Every once in a while I had to cringe just a little bit and plug my ears because it wasn't 100% correct, factual, but nonetheless, I appreciated the effort and sometimes those things, and they did. I agree with Board Member Earl that there are real values in doing that performance. I think of all the things that my children have been able to do in elementary. It's a great program. We ought to be supporting it, but it's kind of a local curriculum issue. In fact, they use it as part of their social studies curriculum to meet their standards. So, and I think that's a great way to do it. I definitely encourage it, but I don't necessarily think it's at the 50,000 foot level, and we're kind of getting down in the weeds on some of these things.
Okay. Member Klein, did you have more, or
I was
your
just going
light's
to,
still on? Okay.
just another comment about it. The gal that wrote this up, she's drilled down the cost down to like the penny. So it would be easy to go through and say, you know, if we wanted to scale it back a little bit, as far as like the bus costs and the venue costs, and do it more local, you know, that would bring down the cost probably significantly. But also, I think we have a lot of schools are not promoting this kind of teaching. There's a handful here and there, but we don't have tests that assess on these particular things, and so there's not as big of a push or in the schools to be really to teach this in a very overt way, in a way that kids will take it to heart and remember it. You know, they might memorize the preamble. You know, we have issues with schools even saying the Pledge of Allegiance, but that's a different story. But this is a way that will incentivize this positive kind of thing, which is our state code requires that these things be taught, that there be a respect for and an understanding of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the essentials and benefits of the free enterprise system, respect for parents, home, family, you know, preparing students to recognize and accept responsibility for preserving and defending the blessings of liberty inherited from prior generations and secured by the Constitution. That's right from our state code. That's from the education code, and yet we don't do, I think, nearly enough of that. And I think that's why you've got a state level group working on this very issue, because it has become a problem. The kids don't understand these things, and music is a fabulous way to help them really take it and learn it and remember it.
Member Norton?
Yeah, I'm a 5th grade teacher, so this is very close to my heart. And for more than 25 years now, I have had, our school participates in the program, but it's free. And I look at that cost and I choke. Most of the schools in our district are using the same program that we use at our school. Yes, the kids love it. Yes, they learn. I have 8th graders and I have 11th graders calling me back saying, hey, Miss Norton, I need the music for that song that we learned in 5th grade. So it stays with them, and it is so important. But it's something that can be done on such a different level, and because we do it locally, we have all the grandparents in the military and the adults in these children's lives there, and I just think that there's a lot of ways around, again, to have the state come through and say, this is the program, this is a local issue, this is a local question.
Member Earl?
Yeah, I guess, just carrying on some dialogue with Zach and the RFP process just a little bit here, and the time frame when this money needs to be encumbered. If I am understanding right, that trying to even get that through before the money needs to be spent, so to speak, by the federal government or committed to, is restrictive, if I'm understanding correctly. Is that accurate?
Zach?
As far as I understand,
Okay.
yes, and Sarah can clarify as far as those dates, but yes.
Okay, so if I'm also understanding this group, that we're wanting to further look at that money, that, well, not 17 million now, but that money could be discussed in some of these other avenues down the road where a RFP process could be adequately addressed. So that is just my comments. I think for this one, I'm currently would recommend that, while I appreciate this, that we consider some of those funds that we're freeing up for this very purpose down the road.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. We're going to vote on this. I'll restate the motion, then we'll vote. And the motion before the board, the amended motion before the board is that the board include the item strengthening civics education to the amount to be deducted from the 17.2 million previously approved to fund the USIMS project, in addition to what was previous approved by the previous amendments. All of those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So the ayes, raise your hand. Vice Chair Davis and Member Klein, the motion doesn't pass. Okay, that cleans up all the amendments. The dividing the motion to divide. I think we're to the end. All of the funds expended?
Yes, I just want to double check with Deputy Stallings. Okay, so I think, with the previous division of the question, now we have the revised amendment motion that contains the final verbiage related to the approval of the Braille embossers.
You're absolutely right, because it's one motion at a time. So, thank you. I was missing one spot. Okay, so the amended motion that's before us is that the board, I'm getting lost in the math before I read it. So the 17.2 isn't correct.
It's 16.3, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're ready. Okay. The amended motion, as amended, is that the board move, the amended motion is that the board fund the USIMS proposal with 16.3 million with ARP ESSER flexible state reserve and ESSER 2 state reserve funding, and the board approve $900,000 for the Braille embossers proposed from ESSER 2 flexible state reserve.
I just ask a clarifying question. So understanding the procedure of the procedural posture we're in right now, if this passes, then that's what happens. If it fails, then we're back to 17.2 for USIMS. Is that right?
That
And
is
the money-
correct.
And the money's still all spent.
That is, that's the proposed amendment as amended. Okay. Do I need to state it or should we vote? Hold it. Do you have a question? What's that? That's in the amendment, but now the original amendment was divided, and so these amendments came in, so now it's as amended. So right now, so you guys know what you're voting for. The motion that has passed is the one for the full 17.3 million. The opportunity before the board is to amend that to this, which it becomes less, and includes the Braille piece. That's all of the work that we've done the last little bit. So you guys, so I'll state the motion, then we're going to vote. The amended motion is that the board fund the USIMS proposal with 16.3 million with ARP ESSER flexible state reserve and ESSER 2 state reserve funding, and that the board approve $900,000 for the Braille embossers proposed from ESSER 2 flexible state reserve. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? With the ayes, raise your hand. Okay, Member Booth, Member Moss, Member Klein, Member Hart, Member Hymas, Member Hutchings, Member Earl, Member Cannon, Vice Chair Davis. Where are you at, Member Belknap?
Aye.
And Member Huntsman. The motion passes. Let me ask the question again. That we met the goal and objective of the work that you guys have, the board has been doing, and you, Sarah, and this whole ESSER experience from last month and this month. So we got it. We're ready for the submittal. Is that correct? Okay. Thank you for your work. Moving on to our next agenda item, which happens to be lunch. There's a couple options, and I've got to be excused, and so I'm turning you're going to get an upgrade here. You're going to have Vice Chair Davis chairing, and I've asked Board Member Lear, who chairs this Law and Licensing Committee, to come up here and assist in making sure we're staying with the agenda and process and checking names and keeping things in the queue. I need to be excused. I won't be participating the rest of the afternoon. I appreciate your work. There's a couple options. Take a full half hour, but I believe at the interest of time, we're going to take a quick 15-minute break. Grab your lunch, bring your lunch in here, and we're going to proceed. And we'll go from there. So thank you, and I'll be in touch tomorrow through all the different other meetings that we have. Thank you for your work.